Welcome back to another episode of the Healing With It podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten, and today I'm really excited because I have my roommate and best friend, Sydne, here with me, and we're going to record an episode. So I'm excited for you guys to meet her and speak with her. I think you're going to learn a lot from her insight, and I guess I have to do the mindful moment of the week before we get started. My mindful moment this week was not being so hard on myself when I made mistakes. I can be pretty critical of myself, but I was able to take a step back this week and really just be mindful of the whole concept that I'm trying my best and that's all we're doing and that's all we can do. And being hard on myself isn't really going to get me anywhere, and I just have to learn from my mistakes and move on. So that was a good learning lesson for me, and I'm really grateful that I've been able to kind of work towards that because that's not something I've always been able to do. But I'm really excited because Sydne is going to join us for our mindful moment of the week. So take it away, Sid.
Okay, so my mindful moment of the week, or more like several mindful moments of the week, is really trying to realize or recognize when I'm moving too quickly. As Kirsten knows, I tend to move at lightning speed and I'm moving too fast most of the time. So really trying to be mindful about when I'm moving too fast, when I should maybe take a few seconds to slow down and really give my body and my mind what it needs. So before coming back to Toronto after spending a busy weekend at home, taking Monday to just lay on the couch and all of my feelings with my puppy was my mindful moment.
I love that. I'm happy that we could share those together. For any of you who don't know, Sydne is my roommate. We are in the same program together, studying naturopathic medicine and coping through this program together. Truly, honestly, don't know what I would do without her because I feel like we're kind of each other's support system in this program, and we just kind of understand what it's like to be in such a difficult program and like be away from home, because both of us don't live where we are originally from and we're both away from our partners. So that's always really hard, but it's nice to have somebody else who's experiencing that alongside you and you can actually talk to. So we figured it makes sense to kind of talk about how we met in the program because it kind of ties into like the relationships and the support system. We met in first year, but honestly not until the second semester of first year. Like I think we had to do one assignment together in homeopathy and I got partnered with you somehow. You gave me your number to like text you about the assignment or something.
Just my little hint.
But then I remember, now I know, at the time I didn't, but this was like the weekend your family came down to visit, so you were busy all weekend. And I remember thinking like, oh, she was like really helpful during the assignment and stuff. And then I remember texting you because like we needed to hand in the assignment and I didn't hear anything from you for like a day or two. And I'm like,
so typical, now you know.
Now I understand. Now at the time, I was like, I'm so confused because she was like really good to work with in class, but why is she not answering me? She's just ghosting me. Like, am I just gonna do this on my own? Now I know. For those of you who don't know, I obviously am not very good at answering my text messages or handing things in before about an hour before they're due. So, which is like the opposite of me, where I like respond to every message pretty much as soon as they're sent, even if I'm busy, just because I like feel like I have to, which is probably a problem in itself. And and then also I always hand things in early. I get so stressed if I'm not working on something and it's due in like 5 days. But then we didn't really talk much after that. But then I remember I started following you on the Scrunch Bar, which is Sydne and her mom's little scrunchy company. And I was like, oh, this is so aesthetic and really cool. And then I remember sitting there and like ruminating on this for like a week. I was like, oh, you know, it would be really cool to like reach out to this girl and do a giveaway with her and these scrunchies because they're so cute. And I remember just thinking about it and I'm like, oh, does this sound stupid? Will she be like, no? I was so nervous. It was like, I don't know why. I'm always like that. I'm like, she's gonna judge me or whatever. So then I think I asked her to go for coffee with me, or I asked you to go for coffee with me, and I was like, oh, she might not even say yes. And then you were like, yeah, I'm not doing anything like at all anytime. So literally
me all the time. If you need somebody to have plans with, it's me.
It's super easy to have plans with. So I chose a good person. Yeah, we planned like a coffee date for a couple weeks into like second semester. And there was like this big snowstorm that happened on the day of the coffee shop. And it was so funny because it started kind of snowing when we got there. And then when we got out, do you remember? There was just like, my car was
just so much snow.
Covered in snow. And I feel like I didn't have like a winter like brush thing in my car for some reason, because I feel like I remember literally we used our hands to brush off my car and you helped me.
It's so funny. Like I have a terrible memory in terms of trying to place where I meet people and like how friendships form. I don't remember anything about this, and it was like 2 years ago. All I remember is that it was a snowstorm, and I remember thinking, dang, this girl is good at driving because you're driving in Toronto in a snowstorm. And that's all I could think about. I'm like, oh my goodness, like she's so brave. But other than that, I remember taking pictures in the coffee shop for our scrunchie giveaway that we never actually did.
Oh yeah, we never did it.
So if anybody's interested in a Starbucks gift card and scrunchie giveaway, let us know, because we've got it ready.
I literally,
for 2 years.
I still have that gift card. It's right there. Literally, I knew she was the one when I asked her on the first date to take photos of me, and she did. I was like, oh, can you take some nice, cute photos of me?
And our friendship hasn't changed.
No, she takes photos of me a lot still. But I reciprocate back now.
Yes.
Yeah, and then after that, we just happened to be in the same lab group for Cadaver Lab, which, if any of you don't know, that's literally looking at dead bodies for anatomy. And so that's obviously an experience in itself and probably not the most comfortable thing, but somehow we bonded over that. And then I kept asking her to go to coffee shops with me, and we kept going to random coffee shops downtown Toronto because that's where our labs were. They were at U of T. And I think ever since then, we continued friendship, but then I think it really like grew last year when we wrote NPLEX, which is like our licensing exam, because we were the only like ones out of our friends who were writing it. So we were texting each other literally every day. Like I don't think a day went by pretty much all summer that we didn't text each other, because we were just like talking about studying and how much we hated it and how hard it was and like asking each other questions. But like I don't think I would have been able to go through studying like that without having someone. Like that was a really big exam to not have someone for.
Yeah, I think it really helped keep us, like we set the same schedule and we studied the same topics at the same time. So it was really essential for me to like keep me on track and like to wake up knowing that, okay, somebody's in this, doing this with me. Yeah, I feel like that did bring us closer for sure, because we literally spent the whole summer doing the exact same thing and complaining about it.
And to put it into context too, like completely different provinces. Like she's from Manitoba, so she was in Manitoba and I was in Ontario, and we still like stayed connected every day. It wasn't like we were able to get together or anything until we actually wrote the exam. So like that was a whole nother thing too. And then after that, I needed a new roommate and I proposed the idea to her, and you know, it took some time, but she decided that I was okay to live with, I guess.
I was trying to decide if we were moving too quickly. No.
Maybe.
No. The real truth is she rescued me from the res life, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, that was a tough situation that I knew you needed to get out of. Having to share a bathroom with everyone and a kitchen. Yeah. I don't know how you did it.
No, I didn't do it well, that's for sure. You can ask anybody I lived with in res. I didn't do it well. But we're here, and it's just another chapter. So that's how Kirsten and I became friends. And now we live together, and it couldn't be better.
It couldn't be better. And we recently just moved into a new apartment together, so that's a whole other bonding experience. She didn't kill me, and I made her move a lot of things after moving already 8 months ago. So, I mean, I think it's going pretty well. So here we are, trying to make it through our clinic year now, which is a whole nother experience. We're like half on the same schedule, half not on the same schedule. So it's kind of weird because I feel like I see you less than I did prior to, because we were doing the same things every day. So it's interesting. And we've also just like been trying to settle into everything too. So now like we've been back and forth, like you've been back to Manitoba and I've been back home. So it's interesting, but I feel like this program just like gives you bonds with people that are different than other bonds they have with people. And it's probably because it's such like a demanding thing that we have to do. And you do need that support system. And so if you don't have that, it's a tough program to get through, and no one can really understand it unless they're in it. Like, it's just not possible. Even like our partners, I feel like they're very supportive, but they know that they don't truly understand what it's like to be in our position because they're not us. And so it's hard to maintain, I feel like, those relationships in general, or to like be the type of friend you want to be for everybody else in your life, because there's just so many demands.
Yeah, it's hard. I think it's the same with kind of anything you're going through in your life that's tough. Like, you always kind of look for people who are experiencing something similar, because you have that, like, you just have that connection and you feel that they can understand. Like, I know with you, Kirsten, I don't know if you feel the same way, but there's certain things that I like come to you with or tell you that I would never really say to another friend or even like my partner, because I'm just like, they're not gonna get it, and then I feel silly for complaining about it or like making it an issue. And if I text you, I know that you're like 98% of the time, unless it's handing something in like on the due date, you're experiencing the same thing. Yeah. So it's just, I think that's kind of like a natural human thing. You look for connection in friendships where people kind of understand what you're going through. Yeah, I agree. And I feel like this program specifically too, because it's just been so much more demanding than like undergrad. Like, undergrad was hard, and like it was nice to have support system from friends, but it's like a totally different type of support that you need. I feel like you do look, like you said, you look for those connections, and this program has really like brought that connection, I feel like. And it's just funny because obviously we would have never met if we weren't in this program. Yeah. Because we're from completely different provinces, but it's like just funny how life works its way out. Like, you're 2 years older than me, and so we're not even in the same age group, but we happen to just like go into the program at the same time, same year. And like, I don't know, I think that's just like, it's how it's meant to be. Like, things always work out how they're meant to be, even if maybe they don't feel like it at the time, or you don't realize it at the time, but like looking back, like, what are the odds, right? And like, I feel like we just have like a really good connection. But we also think very similarly in the sense of like being like more mindful and being like more, like, I feel like we really go in depth with things. Like, when we have conversations, we're always like just talking about like really deep things that I don't feel like I have those conversations as much with other people. And I don't know why, but it just feels like that's the type of connection that we have. Yeah. I think I don't know, I think it comes back to you just feel that they can understand you. I think you can open up so much deeper with somebody when you feel that they're going to have that same perspective, or not even the same perspective, but just that non-judgment understanding. Or relate to you in some way. It's funny because Kirsten and I will be sitting, it'll be like 9 o'clock and we'll start a conversation, and then it's like 2 in the morning and we're like, we gotta go to bed. And then we're like, we should have had the podcast rolling, because then it comes to when we actually sit down to have a podcast conversation and we're all like, what do we talk about? It's so true. Like, the other night, Sydney just got home from the airport and it was like midnight, and then we both had clinic at 8 in the morning, which means we had to get up at 6 in the morning in order to get to clinic in time. And we both just like chatted because we hadn't seen each other in like 3 days. 4 days, which, oh, God forbid. A lot can happen in 4 days, you know? A lot. But to be fair, like, we were gone, like, away from each other prior to that, and then we saw each other for, like, the day or two in between, right? And then, like, so we didn't really have a lot of time to talk anyways with clinic. But yeah, so then we always get into these, like, tangents of, like, talking about things, so it's so funny. This is really funny because we're really making it sound like we have, like, an unhealthy connection attachment. No, we do have lives outside of each other, but we also are literally living together and we're doing the exact same thing. So to an extent, it's like we see each other all the time and we can't really help that. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we are doing the same thing 5 out of 7 days a week. Yeah, and another thing that I think brought us kind of closer together, or not kind of, brought us closer together is just the fact that we are both away from home and away from our families. And I think that's been one of the things that's been hardest on both of us. Like, we work through that a lot together, and coach each other through being away from home and the homesickness and the loneliness. Because, I mean, even we talk about, you know, how well we get along and how important it is for us to have each other. There's still a piece of us both that like misses home and like misses family, and like we can't replace that for each other, kind of thing. No. But yeah, I'm just curious what for you has been the hardest, I guess, about being away from home?
Yeah. Honestly, because I know I have like an anxious attachment style, like I'm very much like, I've always been like this growing up, very dependent on just like being around like my safe people and like specific areas because I'm just so anxious all the time, and like new things in general or like different things is really hard for me to adjust to. And so regardless of whether or not like I want to be independent, I have this like need to be around those people like I grew up, like my family and my parents, obviously, and like my boyfriend. Those are just like very comfortable for me. And so I find that when I'm away from home, I think the hardest part is for me to actually leave, is what I find. I still struggle when I'm away and I have like my tough days, but I find that leaving, it always seems like such a big deal to me, and I always have such like an emotional response to leaving, and it's always been like that. When I was a kid, when I was being dropped off to daycare, I remember like my mom leaving, like I cried every single time, and like I was at daycare almost every single day, and I knew she was going to come pick me up, just like I know at some point I'm going to go back home. But at the same time, like for whatever reason, my mind just like creates this story. I don't know if like you do this ever, but it creates this whole story about like leaving or something that's not even true. And then I'm completely fine for the most part. I can be independent and I can do my thing and I'm fine. And again, having like a good support system here makes a big difference. But at the same time, like I just build it up in my head of like, oh my God, I have to leave soon. Like if it's like 2 days before me leaving or something, or like a day before me leaving, I'm worked up. Like I'm thinking about it the whole time. So I find it's just when I go home, because I'm not home for long periods now, I just can't stop thinking about it. So it's almost like easier for me to not go home. Because if I go home, then I have to leave, right?
Yeah.
Which is silly because it's like I want to be home. And I remember in university, I mean, I went to university with my boyfriend, so that made it a lot easier. But like leaving home and leaving my parents, even though I'm a grown human being, like it's just like,
I feel ya.
I don't know. It's such a weird thing to explain to people if they don't understand it, haven't experienced it. But I remember like I would go at least a month almost every time I left for school until I went back home. At least a month, sometimes 2. And that was normal. And like now, to think about being away from home for a month, and again, like probably not having my boyfriend here has a part in that, but to think about that is absolutely insane. For me, I could do it, but would be really hard. And I almost think it's just the fact or the thought of like going back after that time, being comfortable, and then leaving.
Yeah, it's like that immediate discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
You get in your car and you drive away and there's like tears streaming down your face.
Every time. Like
it's like you're never going home again. But it's like it's like that we don't like discomfort.
No.
And leaving home, like the place where you are comfortable because it's home, like that's your place. It's like icky. Yeah. It feels gross.
And I was thinking about it the other day. I need to like write myself when I'm in a really good place. When I'm away from home, I need to like write letters, or even when I am home, but like in this specific situation, like write a letter to myself, like in that position of when I'm feeling that way, but from the stance of like me feeling okay. So that when I'm in those like panic states of like, oh my God, how am I ever going to make it through this? I can like read back on like logical Kirsten, who is like, I'm in this position that you're worrying about right now and I'm completely okay. Like even when things are hard, I'm able to be okay. It's okay and we can work through this, because I think that's something I worked on a lot, is trying to like find that peace within myself instead of looking for it somewhere else.
Yes.
And that does make it easier. But at the same time, it's like that panic state of like leaving, or like the first day of being back away from home. And it's like, how am I ever going to do this? And then the thoughts just spiral. Like we all know how anxiety works. It's just bam, bam, bam. Like those thoughts are just coming at you and they're just going to worst case scenario. Realistically, I just have to tell myself that like, I'm safe. Everything's going to be okay. And if I like get that in my mind, like then I won't have that physical response that comes along with the emotional kind of like mental response. It's a weird thing. It's so weird. But I think I need to like write myself a letter in that position. And I think that might be helpful for me to be like, oh, okay, like she did fine a couple weeks ago when she was in the same position that I'm worrying about.
Yeah, I like that idea actually. Because it is, we tell ourselves stories, or we let our minds tell us stories, or make up these stories about us that are not true. And I think that when we feed into those stories, that's when we see things just explode. So to have like your own story that you wrote about being okay while you're in Toronto, and being able to go back to that and remind yourself like things are going to be okay. Even if they're hard, they're still going to end up to be okay. Because things can be hard and we can still be okay.
And I think that's like the most important point to like get across to yourself in these situations, because it's not realistic to say that like everything's going to be like fine and dandy, because like we know that's just not life. But I think it's important to give yourself that reassurance that even when times are hard, because they will be at times, you're able to cope, you're able to be okay, you're able to get through the hard times and survive it. Like you're safe, you're fine, everything's gonna be okay in the end. Everything works out at some point. Even if we're uncomfortable, we get through those uncomfortable moments and we grow from them, and we usually feel pretty good. Like I know personally, like when I do something really hard, I always feel really good afterwards, but it's working myself up to it. Like I'm never going to be able to do this. Like thinking back to like first day of clinic, like that was absolute end of the world for me. I was like, how am I ever going to make it through this? I just want to run away right now and just like not look back, which is obviously not my logical side of the brain thinking, but in my head, I'm telling myself this story of like, it's impossible. I can't be okay. I can't survive this. There's no way I can do this. I'm never going to be ready, which is true. Like you're never really going to be ready for that kind of situation. But like telling yourself that you're not going to make it through. And that's not true. Like regardless if it's uncomfortable, regardless if you don't know anything, step into that discomfort. You're going to be okay. It's just going to be hard at first. But like from those hard things is where we see like the most growth anyways.
100%. And look at you now. We're 4 weeks in and you're not a mess.
I'm okay.
You're okay.
I have my days, but like I'm okay.
Yeah.
I feel like the biggest thing I've told myself and like kind of gone in with the mindset for clinic recently at least is like being okay with like not knowing anything.
Yes, yeah.
Which is like hard because big imposter syndrome, especially being in like a medical type program. So many people have so much knowledge. They're so smart. Everybody brings something to the table. And it's really easy to tell yourself that you're the only one who doesn't know anything. Like you know nothing. And everybody else for whatever reason knows everything. And that's not true. And I feel like I've actually kind of noticed people, maybe it's like the fact that we're actually like with people in person for the first time in 2 years, a consistent basis. And we're around like those same people every week. But I feel like people are like more authentic in this clinic setting of like being honest of what they know and what they don't know. When you're like sitting in the clinic room with them, people are like, oh, I actually don't know how to do this, or what do you think about this? And it's like, oh, like this feels good. And when you open up, other people are more likely to open up about it. So I've kind of like gone in with that mindset of, okay, I'm just gonna like be honest and say I don't know and ask questions and be okay with just not knowing. And even if like I embarrass myself, which is my worst fear, I hate it, but it's super uncomfortable for me, and I mean anyone really, just like telling myself that it's gonna be okay. Mm-hmm. Might suck at the time. It might be really, really uncomfortable physically and mentally, but you make it through, and then that kind of like trains your brain to be like, oh, okay, we can actually do these really uncomfortable, hard situations and be okay coming out of it. And just why don't we just like go through this year and learn things, because I feel like we'll learn more if we're open about what we don't know and just like take what we can from it and then make it through.
Yeah, totally. I know for like another thing that comes to my mind kind of about this is as you talk about, you know, like just kind of trying to be okay with not being okay, mm-hmm. and recognizing that things are going to be hard sometimes. And at the end of it, like you're still coming out, mm-hmm. right? Like you're surviving. Mm-hmm. There's a quote that says like, so far you've survived 100% of your bad days or something, which is so true. Mm-hmm. Like even when we feel at our worst, like a complete mess of a human being, we're still doing it and we're doing our best. And at the end of it, we end up okay. Mm-hmm. And I think what comes to my mind is practicing that self-compassion. And it's really hard when you're not in a place where you feel compassionate for yourself. Mm-hmm. But I think that's when it's most important. And recognizing, you know, even though this is hard, like how brave you are for doing it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes my partner stuff, he will say that all the time to me, like, you're so courageous. Like, I could never do what you're doing. Like, I could never leave home mm-hmm. and travel to another province and be alone and mm-hmm. study medicine. And, you know, like, it's one thing after another in this program, mm-hmm. Whether it's studying for exams or entering clinic. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're even doing it, I think has to be recognized, right? Mm-hmm. So knowing that, yes, things are hard, but having that thought that it's like, but oh my gosh, the strength that I have to actually be able to do this.
I know. And it's so true. I feel like day by day, we just look at it like we're making it. But then if you look back, how far have we come? Think about like all that we've actually learned and like what we knew at the beginning of first year compared to what we actually know now. We might not feel like we know a lot, but we definitely know a lot more than we did we've done so many things. Like if you look at all like the little difficult things that we made it through in the past 3 years, like that's actually like there's a lot that we've gained and a lot that we've done. And so I think it's just important in life in general to take a look back and see like, where were you a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? See like even what your mindset was, even if like maybe physically things haven't changed. What were your thoughts like a year ago? How did you think? I have a journal that I've had since the beginning of first year, and that's when I started journaling. And I'll look back at randomly like, okay, I like to do this. I don't know if this is weird, but so if I like say today is June 1st, if I write like in my journal on June 1st, I'll go look back at like June 1st a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever it was, or like the closest time to like that date. You can clearly articulate the thought process that you had at that time. And like I look back and it's just so different, like the way I journaled. Honestly, I think I started journaling just in general. It was like an outlet when I was going through difficult times and didn't feel like I had like a good support system, like friend wise, and just like emotionally I needed more when I was away at school. But also, like, I feel like I did it because I was trying to, like, prove to myself and others that I was okay, like, by myself. And I didn't need certain people in my life or whatever, right? Yeah. And, like, from that, it just kind of trickled in as, like, oh, I kind of like this, right? Like, oh, this is kind of helpful. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, I feel like I like to do that and just look at, like, oh, wow, like, my mindset has changed a whole lot. Like, there's a lot of growth that happened, but, like, day by day, it might not seem like that.
It's true, and that's the importance of self-reflection, and it's a hard thing to do, and it's funny that we're talking about this because anytime we have to do a reflection assignment, I'm the one who's sitting there and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is a waste of my time. What are they making me do? But realistically, self-reflection is so important because as humans, I think we are set to look forward. We're always focused on, okay, what is the next thing? Like, what do I have to do an hour from now? What do I have to do tomorrow? What do I have to do next week? And we're constantly focused on like the next task or the next like life event or life stage that we have to go into or are expected to go into. And we forget everything that we've done like to get us to the end or to the next stage. Not the end, there is no end, but do you know what I mean? Like we forgot everything that we had to do to get us to clinic. And when we graduate and we're practicing, chances are we are going to forget everything that we had to go through and that we had to do to get there, and we'll just be focused on that moment and everything that is going wrong or everything that's difficult or everything that's, you know, like not working out the way we thought it would, and we just forget about, okay, but what about all of the things that we did that you made it through, that you thought you weren't gonna survive, and we just tend to forget about that.
It's true. I think about back to like first year and I'm like the tough times that like I went through and how hard it was, and just thinking like, how will I ever make it through 4 years of this program? And then there was like so much in between, but it was just like, okay, just the next thing, because there's just so many things that you don't look back and realize like, oh wow, I did this and that was really hard. I did that and like I was really worried about that and it was hard and I spent a lot of time studying for it. Like even looking at OSCE, which is like our physical practical exam before we go into clinic kind of thing. Like there was a lot of work and studying that went into that, and that wasn't even that long ago. Like that was back in March, 4 months ago, 3 months ago.
I already forgot. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Dang.
It feels so small. Like it feels like I forget about all the work that was put in to actually do that. So that's a good perspective to look at, because we often are so future focused, like you said. Like we're always looking for the next thing, and I feel like that probably derives from like just survival in general. Like that's how people had to live once upon a time. What's the next thing that I have to protect myself and my family and whatever against? Totally. And like now, it's always good to look forward, but like I totally don't believe in like 5-year plans and stuff. I know that's like a big thing, and I 100% used to be that person. Like, what's your 5-year plan? Where are you going to be in 5 years? This and that. I think they're kind of setting you up for failure in a way. Yeah. Obviously, if that's something that works for you, that's something that works for you. But I just feel like you put yourself in this position of like, I have to be at this point in 5 years. And if I'm not, I'm a failure. I haven't gotten like where I wanted to be. And then you just feel bad about yourself instead of focusing on like, okay, like, yes, this is the ultimate goal, or this is something I want to get done. But like, let's just focus on like what we can do today to get ourselves there. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just like overwhelming because time goes by and then you're like, like this is sooner than I thought it was going to be and I'm nowhere close. And then all you do is worry about it and feel bad about it instead of like actually working towards it. And I think it just comes back to like being present, which is really, really hard. And we're like not built for that. I think as humans, it's really hard for us, especially living in the world that we do with like social media and just like the fast paced environment, like hustle culture. Hustle culture.
One more time.
Hustle culture. There we go. I feel like we're just so built for that like it's really hard for us to live presently. And it's like, as humans, we're in general set up for failure in that sense. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to just be kind to yourself day to day. Like, what have I done today that's got me one step closer? And if that means like not doing anything and taking a break, kind of like you said in your mindful moment, just like letting yourself have those days where you don't do anything, that I think propels you more forward than being like, oh, I have to do this every day to get to where I need. Because at the end of the day, then you're spending your whole life working towards something. And like, really, we all have the same way we're going out. Like at the end, we're all dying. Like that sounds really like grim, but it's true, right? It's like, true. So what are you doing in between? What are you doing day to day that makes you feel good, that makes other people feel good? I don't know. I feel like that's more important.
Yeah. I think you explained it nicely. Like there's a difference between having goals and having like a plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that having goals is important. I think it's important to, you know, have a why, I guess. So
I agree.
Just because this is what's most relevant in our life, I always come back to school and I'm like, why do I always talk about school?
Because it's the only thing that exists in our mind currently.
Yeah, because it's just we're so entrenched in it. But I just think that it's important to have a why. So when we're in school and we're going through this, we always come back to, or we're always told to come back to like, why are you here? Like, what is the end goal? And ultimately it's going to be different for all of us. But I think that propels us to the finish line of school and really keeps us like motivated and focused. And I think it helps ultimately to be able to stay a little bit present. But when you have a structured plan where it's like, I need to, you know, be married by 24, I need to finish school by 27, I need to have a baby by 30. It's when we start putting deadlines and dates on things and ages that I think that's so much pressure, because when we don't meet that, that's when we become self-critical and we cannot focus on the present because we're too worried about how quickly we have to get things done or the things that we haven't finished on time. And there's no timeline on that. Whereas if you have a broad idea, you know, in 5 years, I would like to have a family of some kind at some point. You know, I would like to be finished my degree and I would like to be working in this area. I think that that is more, you know, realistic and helps us then create those mini goals, like you said, during the day. It's like, okay, well, what's going to help me, you know, have this at the end of the day? I think it's when we start setting dates and deadlines for ourselves, we kind of run into a little trap. But one little tidbit that I was going to offer is I've practiced it in the past, but I've seen people do it, and I feel like it's a good mindful moment. A good daily practice that you can bring in is actually writing to-done lists instead of to-do lists. And basically it's at the end of every day. You go through your day and you write down everything that you accomplished instead of writing down the things that you have to do tomorrow. Or you write both, because it is important. Like, I love my lists. So I'm a list girl. You can ask anybody. I make lists for my lists. And they keep me on task. Yeah. And being on task is something that is really hard for me. So I need a list and I need a box to check. So I think it's okay to do both. Yeah. But basically the idea is you write down everything that you accomplished. Like it can be something so simple as you woke up and you had a shower. Yeah. Right? Or you got dressed for the day, because these are things that can be hard. And it's like a practice to help yourself recognize all of the things that you did and not be so focused and self-critical on like all of the things that maybe you didn't get done that you wanted to get done.
I think that like comes back to, again, like just really reflecting. It allows you to not just look at what's next, what do I have to do next, but what have I already done? Because we're often just so focused on that future. We don't reflect on what we did accomplish. Even if it's small, like we do so many things throughout the day. If you take a look back, you'd probably be surprised at how much you did, but you just don't acknowledge it. We often don't. We're just so ready for what's next. It's just how we're wired, and it's really hard to get out of that mindset. But I do really like that to-done list idea, because it does really encourage you to have that more present mind thinking and that reflective mind thinking, And when we practice things like this, like on paper or with different exercises, it's like a way of like rewiring our brain and our thought process to just start thinking like that more automatically. Like, oh, I just did this. Soon enough, you're going to realize that you're here doing this thing and, oh, I accomplished that. Like, I'm really proud of myself. On to the next thing. Oh, I accomplished that, you know? I think that's really important to kind of train yourself to be more in that mindset. Not that you'll be like that every day, but if you can have moments in a day where you notice something, or one day you're really mindful of everything you've accomplished, or you take some more time at the end of the day. I think that's like a really good practice.
It's being able to recognize that you can have both. Like, you can have a to-do list and you can still appreciate the things that you've already accomplished and that you've already done. I know for me, something that continues to be really hard is stripping back that all or nothing mentality, like that you can only be one thing. So for me, it's like, okay, well, like you can only have a to-do list, right? Like you can only go forward. Like you cannot focus on what's behind you, or you're ruminating on what's behind you and you're not getting anything done. It's like, no, you can slow down and have both. And that plays into so many different areas. But I know for me, that's one thing that is finding that balance between the opposites, right? Like you can have both. You can move fast and you can find slow moments as well.
Yeah, and I think we do, like, just as humans, put ourselves in these boxes. Like, we just have this tendency to put ourselves in boxes. Like, we have to be this and we can't be something else. But that's not true. Life is so dynamic. It's such a broad spectrum of things that we can be, and we have to be able to allow ourselves to be that. Like, you can enjoy going out and, like, being with people, but you can also enjoy being by yourself. And I think like having both of those is really important when you hear about like the introverted extrovert or vice versa. Like it's okay to be more than one thing. I feel like sometimes I catch myself being like, oh, well, I can't do this because that would contradict me in this other way. But realistically, if it's something I enjoy, I don't see a problem in that. And it's something we have to kind of, again, be mindful of throughout the day. If we notice ourselves kind of subconsciously telling ourselves like we can't be this for X, Y, and Z. I mean, realistically, if that's something you want to do, whatever it is, we have to be open to kind of exploring like having those dynamic relationships with ourselves and not putting ourselves in boxes or other people in boxes. Because again, it's so easy to judge ourselves, judge other people, look at someone online and say, well, how can they do this or say this when they do this or said that yesterday or something, you know? Obviously, like there's a fine line for certain things, but in general, I think it's really important to not put ourselves in those boxes.
I agree. And it brings it back kind of full circle if we want to talk about like leaving home. We can be sad and we can also be kind of excited. And for me personally, that's been really hard because I have struggled big time having to leave home and with like being homesick and lonely and missing my people. And at the same time, wanting to feel excited about being in Toronto and living in the city and going to medical school and trying to enjoy and appreciate like the opportunity. And I find that I don't let myself. And I don't know if you experience that as well, but it's like you feel bad about leaving home and leaving your people. So you're like, okay, well, I cannot be sad and lonely and feel homesick and also be excited to be in Toronto. You have to pick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's where things get like tricky because you get into that mindset where it's like, okay, well, I can't be happy. Like I'm not allowed to be excited. I'm not allowed to feel grateful. Like I have to be sad.
I think that's like, even tonight, like I noticed that kind of thought in my mind. So my boyfriend came up and visited me this past weekend. And then he left and I was like having a hard time with that, being sad. And then he called me tonight before we were going to record this podcast. And I was kind of like happy to talk to him, obviously. But I was like, oh, I have something to do. And then I felt guilty for being like, oh, but I'm so upset that he's leaving. How can I not talk to him all night? Like, or not have a full conversation with him or have plans and that don't include him kind of thing. And it's like, you can be both. Like, I can still be sad that he was leaving, still miss him, and also have like other things on the go. But I also noticed that too with my anxiety. I feel like in the past, and I still find myself doing this sometimes, is like defining myself by my anxiety. Like I am my anxiety. Like I am an anxious person rather than I have anxiety. And I do it often, I think, which is really hard to like separate it. And then when I do that, I notice like, okay, now I'm defining myself and I have a hard time when like I get into those really anxious moments of being like, wait, but like today I feel really good and I'm happy, but I thought I was anxious. And then I confuse myself. But like I literally like go into like this deep
classic.
like what?
Classic anxiety.
And then I'm like, oh, wait a second. I thought about this the other day. You can still be anxious and have your anxious moments, but also be happy. Like, you don't have to be one or the other. And that's how we live our lives fully, is like being able to have all of those emotions while also going back from one to the other and being okay with that and accepting that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I'm really hard on myself about too. Mm-hmm. It's just like, if you're struggling, like I find if I'm struggling, like I better be struggling. Yeah. You know, like it's a struggle for days. And I'm like, I have the mindset that it's like, you're struggling. Like there's no way out of here. Yeah. Like you just got to keep pushing through and keep struggling, and eventually it'll go away. And then, you know, you can be that other thing. I don't let myself, you know, appreciate the moments, or I let go of my routines or whatever it is, because in that moment or for those days, I can only struggle. Like I'm not allowed to take care of myself anymore, and I'm not allowed to like go out with friends or, you know, like laugh and practice gratitude. Like, no, those are for the good days only. Yeah. Right? Yep. When realistically, as we all know, those should be practiced more religiously on like the bad days, because that's when we build the healthier habits and, like you talked about, rewire some of those negative thinking patterns. But yeah, that's something for me. I talk about it all the time. Like I'm a broken record when it comes to just my own kind of self-sabotage. Yeah, I was just gonna say self-sabotage, like almost like feeling like you need to pull yourself back into that negative mindset. You find yourself noticing, or at least I do personally, like, oh, I'm really happy now, and I notice that, and then I'm like, oh, but you're actually anxious. And, like, I start to pull myself into that mindset. Yeah. You're like, get back there.
Yeah, like, don't be happy. How dare you be happy? Yeah. And he's like, wait, whoa. That's the whole point, is, like, we want to, if we're having a good day, like, let yourself have a good day. You can still have anxiety, and it's going to come up and do its thing, but, like, you can also be happy at the same time. It doesn't have to be, like, one or the other, or, like, oh, I have to be anxious all the time. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense, but, like, the mind is so weird.
Yeah, I wonder what it is. I often wonder, because as I'm in my struggles, I'm like, why am I doing this? And I'm fully aware. Yeah. Which is the worst part. That's the worst. Is I'm sitting there knowing, thinking like, oh, I should go grab my journal, or I should roll out my yoga mat. And then I'm like, nah, I'm just going to sit here and wallow. Like, I know what will make me feel better. There's just a piece of me that's like, sorry, sister, you can't have this.
How dare you be happy? How dare you practice gratitude in this moment of sadness?
How dare you? So I don't know what it is. I'm still trying to figure that out, so I'll get back to y'all. But I don't know what causes that.
I don't know. But I feel like we could talk all night about everything and anything. We'll probably have to do another episode, but I feel like we should wrap it up before we talk for 2 hours. I know. But we'll definitely do another episode together, because it's a lot of fun having these conversations with Sid, and just like having her on the podcast. It's a lot more fun than sitting with myself, to be honest. So I think you'll probably be hearing more from her if she wants to come back.
Yeah, well, you know where to find me.
I will link down Sydney's social media below as well, but tell them where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, and that's about the only place, or at CCNM.
True.
I'm usually in one of those places. My Instagram is at The Mind's Haven. That's where I post most of my, you know, mental health and well-being content when I get around to posting it.
Yeah, Sid is really good at being like mindful and posting that kind of stuff. So she has a lot of good insight to share with you, and I'm trying to get her to post more. Motivate her to post more, because she has a lot of good stuff to share. So if you give her a follow and encourage her, that would be really, really nice. But otherwise, thank you guys for listening. I had a lot of fun with this podcast. It was a really good one, and I'm excited to hear what you guys think about it. So make sure to send us a message on our Instagram. I'll have that linked below as well for the Healing With It podcast, or you can always send us an email, which will also be linked below. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a lovely night, and thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.